Okay, so have you ever felt like you're trying to build these good habits, but you're just like totally overwhelmed by the idea of making big
Oh,
changes?
yeah, I've been there. Totally get it. It's like, where do you even begin?
Right. Like you want to be that person who wakes up at 5 a.m., meditates, works out, eats perfectly, all that. But then you hit snooze like 5 times and the whole plan goes out the window.
It's tough, right? And that's kind of what drew me to this book, Atomic Habits. It's like this whole different
Oh,
approach.
yeah. Atomic habits.
hmm
Those are good things. So what's the big idea?
Well, it's all about these tiny changes, like really small, almost unnoticeable tweaks to your routine that you just keep doing consistently. And like the name suggests, these little atomic changes over time it can build up to some pretty incredible results.
Interesting. So, like, instead of trying to overhaul my entire life,
Mm,
I just focus on these tiny, manageable steps.
exactly. It's kind of like building a muscle, you know? You wouldn't expect to bench press 200 pounds on your first day at the gym, right?
Right? You got to start small and work your way up.
Totally. So in Atomic Habits, James Clear, the author, lays out these 4 laws of behavior change. They're like a framework for understanding how habits actually work and, more importantly, how to change them.
Okay, I'm all about frameworks. So let's break down these laws. What's the first one?
So first up, we've got the cue. Think of it like the trigger that sets a habit in motion. It's that thing that kind of nudges you to do the behavior.
Okay, so like, what kind of things could be cues?
Oh, it could be anything, really. Like, you walk into the kitchen, you see a plate of cookies on the counter, that's your cue to grab one.
Hmm.
Or like, you hear your phone buzz, that's your cue to check it.
Yeah, and those can be tough to resist. Like, my phone buzzing is basically a Pavlovian response at this point. I hear that sound and I have to
Yeah,
check it.
totally, totally. We all have those, right? But the point is, once you're aware of those cues, you can start to manage them.
Okay, so we identify the cue. What's next in this chain reaction?
Next comes the craving. This is the motivational force behind the habit, the why you're doing it. It's the desire for the reward that the habit delivers.
So, like, if the cue is my phone buzzing, the craving might be that feeling of connection or that little dopamine hit from seeing a notification.
Exactly. You got it. And then that craving leads to
The response, right. That's the actual habit itself.
bingo. So in that phone example, the response would be you picking up the phone and checking the notification.
Makes sense. So we've got the cue, the craving, the response. What's the final piece of the puzzle?
The reward, of course. This is the payoff, the thing that reinforces the habit loop. It's that feeling of satisfaction, relief, pleasure, whatever it is, that makes your brain go, hey, that felt good, let's do it again.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this all connects. So we've got cue, craving, response, reward. These 4 laws create this sort of feedback loop, right?
Absolutely. And it's important to understand that this loop can work for us or against us.
Right. So how do we actually use these laws to change our habits? Like, let's say I want to start exercising regularly. Where do I even begin?
Well, let's put on our habit detective hats and use the 4 laws to investigate. What's the cue that triggers your current non-exercising habit?
Hmm, that's a good question. I guess maybe it's getting home from work feeling exhausted.
Okay, so the cue is coming home from work. What's the craving there?
Probably the craving for relaxation and comfort after a long day.
Hmm?
And then the response is, well, collapsing on the couch and binge watching something.
And the reward.
That temporary feeling of stress relief and escapism, I guess.
Okay, great. So now that you've broken it down, you can start to tweak those elements.
Okay, I'm ready to become a habit ninja.
Love it. So one strategy is to change the cue. What if instead of coming home, changing, and then going to the couch, you change into your workout clothes before you even sit down?
Oh, that's a good idea. I mean, once I'm on the couch, it's game over.
Exactly. Or you could try changing the reward. Instead of vegging out on TV, you could plan a fun activity for after your workout, something you really look forward to.
That's smart. So I'm linking the workout with a positive experience, not just seeing it as a chore.
Right. It's all about making the good habits more appealing and the bad habits less so.
Okay, this is all making sense. Now, what about building new habits? Atomic Habits has this cool technique called habit stacking, right?
Oh yeah, habit stacking is brilliant. It's all about taking advantage of existing habits to build new ones.
So like piggybacking off something you already do consistently.
Exactly. Let's say you want to start flossing regularly, but you always forget.
Guilty as charged.
Well, think about a habit you already do every day without fail, like brushing your teeth.
Okay, yeah, I pretty much have that one down.
Perfect. So the habit stack would be after I brush my teeth, I will floss. You're essentially linking the new habit, flossing, to the existing habit, brushing, which is already wired into your brain.
So I'm basically tricking my brain into accepting this new habit as part of the routine.
That's clever. And, the book had some pretty incredible stories about how habit stacking can snowball into some significant changes, right?
Oh, for sure. There was this one about a guy who wanted to start reading more. He made a habit stack. After I pour my morning coffee, I will read for 10 minutes.
So simple, but I bet it works.
And over time, those 10 minutes add up. He ended up reading like a book a week just by making that one small change to his morning routine.
Okay, I'm totally on board with habit stacking. Now, one thing that really intrigued me in the book was this idea of identity-based habits.
Ah, that's one of my favorites. This is where things get really interesting.
So what's the gist of it?
Well, with identity-based habits, you're not just focusing on the actions you want to take, but the person you want to become. It's like instead of saying, I want to lose weight, you say, I am a healthy person.
So it's about aligning your habits with your desired identity. Yep, exactly. And it's powerful because your identity drives your behaviors. If you see yourself as a healthy person, you're more likely to make choices that support that identity, like exercising and eating nutritious food.
It's almost like playing a role, like you're stepping into the character of the person you want to be.
That's a great way to think about it. And the book has this really compelling example about someone who wanted to become a morning person. Instead of focusing on just waking up earlier, she started thinking of herself as a morning person and making choices that aligned with that identity.
So she wasn't just setting an alarm, she was changing her whole mindset about who she was.
Exactly. And over time, those early mornings became easier and more natural because it was all part of her identity as a morning person.
Okay, that's pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah.
Now, we can't talk about habits without acknowledging the role of our environment, right?
Oh, absolutely. The environment is huge. It can either work for you or against you. Think about it. If you're trying to eat healthier, but your kitchen counters are covered in junk food, you're making it a lot harder on yourself.
It's like setting yourself up for a constant temptation battle.
Right. It's not about willpower. It's about setting up your environment to support your goals.
So what are some ways we can tweak our environments to make good habits easier and bad habits harder?
Well, the book talks about this idea of making the cues of good habits obvious and the cues of bad habits invisible. So if you want to read more, keep a book on your nightstand instead of your phone.
Yeah, make it easy to grab the book and harder to reach for the phone.
Exactly. Or like if you're trying to drink more water, keep a water bottle filled and visible on your desk all day.
I can see how those little things would make a big difference. It's about taking away those mental barriers and making the good choices the more automatic ones.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of social influence. Surround yourself with people who support your goals and encourage your good habits.
Okay, so we've covered building good habits and optimizing our environment. But let's face it, breaking bad habits, that's the tough one. Does Atomic Habits offer any guidance for that?
Absolutely. A lot of the same principles apply, but you're kind of using them in reverse. So instead of making good habits obvious and accessible, you want to make bad habits invisible and difficult.
So like if I'm trying to break my social media addiction, I could delete those apps from my phone, or at least log out of them.
Exactly. Make it more of a hassle to access them. Or if you're trying to cut back on watching TV, put the remote in a drawer instead of leaving it on the coffee table.
So it's about adding friction to those unwanted behaviors, making them less appealing.
Exactly. And remember those 4 laws. Think about how you can manipulate those elements to your advantage. If the cue is seeing a notification, turn off those notifications.
Okay, so I'm disrupting the habit loop and making it less automatic. This is great stuff.
And then remember, breaking bad habits is all about replacing them with good ones. So figure out what positive habit you can substitute for that negative one.
Makes sense. So if I'm trying to stop mindlessly scrolling on my phone in the evening, maybe I pick up a book instead.
Perfect example. You're giving yourself something positive to fill that void.
This is making me feel so empowered. Now, one thing I wanted to ask you about is this concept of the plateau of latent potential that James Clear talks about in the book.
Yeah, yes. This is so relatable. It's that frustrating feeling of putting in the work, staying consistent with your new habits, but not seeing any noticeable progress.
Yeah, like you're working hard but feeling stuck, like you're getting nowhere. It can be so demotivating.
Totally. But Atomic Habits reminds us that often the most significant changes are happening beneath the surface, even when we can't see them.
So it's like an iceberg where you only see the tip, but there's this massive structure underneath the water.
Great analogy. All those small, consistent actions you're taking are building something substantial, even if it's not immediately visible.
So it's a reminder to trust the process and not get discouraged when we don't see results right away.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that progress isn't always linear. There will be plateaus, setbacks, even moments when you feel like giving up. But the key is to keep going, even when it's tough.
That's really encouraging. So I guess the big takeaway from Atomic Habits is that it's not about overnight transformations. It's about embracing the power of tiny changes, consistently applied over time.
That's the beauty of it. It's a reminder that we all have the power to change our lives, one small step at a time.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm feeling pretty fired up to go out there and start building some Atomic Habits. And for those of you listening, I challenge you to think about one tiny habit you can start building today. It doesn't have to be huge, just something small, something you can do consistently. Remember, those tiny actions can add up to some pretty incredible results over time. Happy habit building.
Happy habit building.